Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of Dead Boy Detectives. Great series premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, maybe I knew this ahead of time and maybe I didn't. Well, two things. One, I don't think I really knew that this was a Sandman spinoff technically, but also it makes sense because the other thing is that the Dead Boy Detectives first appeared in the Sandman comics. So I was like, okay, so that makes a lot of sense. There's also there's a cameo that happens in this episode. I was like, okay, I was like hoping since it's a Sandman spinoff we get that, but we did. Okay, well, I'll get to that soon enough. I do like that they just jump us in the middle of it. Obviously, like, Charles and Edwin are in the middle of a case. They're running from a ghost to, and once again, like, I always love learning ahead of time, like, the supernatural rules. So, like, right, even though they're ghosts, they can't interact with the real world, but the question then becomes, well, do they have to focus or are they just naturally able to do it? I think you've been around the block long enough, you learned some ghost tricks, so they probably eventually had to learn how to do it, like, very naturally, like, because, like, right, when they're running in that hallway and they bump into, like, that cart, it moved. So it's like, right, they can't interact with the living world, but it's probably just like a byproduct of you probably keep yourself always like that. Like, is it easy just to pass through stuff? Because, I mean, once again, you get into, like, well, how do you not constantly fall through the floor all the time? Like, I'm sure some of that stuff has been, because they've had decades to kind of, like, narrow that down and figure that stuff out. So whether the show will really get technical about stuff like that, I don't know. We'll probably have to wait till we get, like, a fresh ghost to really kind of go over some of that stuff eventually. But either way, it's just kind of interesting to know that. I also love how, like, I mean, just the episode in general, and I think we're probably going to get a lot more of it as the show progresses. Like, it seems weird. I was just thinking about something. I'm like, this show reminded me of something, and I just can't remember what the example I was thinking of at the time. Because this show seems like it's going to be a trippy show. Beetlejuice. That's what it was. Certain things about this episode made me go, kind of has a Beetlejuice vibe to it. Maybe I also have that recently in my mind because obviously, like, the trailer had came out for, like, the Beetlejuice sequel. So maybe that's why I probably wouldn't have correlated, even thought Beetlejuice until if it wasn't for, like, the most recent Beetlejuice trailer and stuff. So, but either way, it definitely has it kind of has like that feel and vibe of a Beetlejuice, which I think is interesting. It's like a really neat tone. I should also point out, too, I don't have any experience with the Dead Boy Detectives. I've never read the comics. My only familiarity with the characters are the one episode they popped up in season 3 of Doom Patrol. So, same thing for, obviously, Crystal is in the mix because of that as well. But regardless, initially they're running from like I said, a guy in a gas mask. And obviously we find out that Charles has his bag of tricks, basically an infinite pocket dimension in his bag. And it is that thing of, why leave anything at the office? And he's like, well, I didn't bring the book because I didn't think I'd need it. It's like, you have an infinite amount of space in there. It's like, why not just take everything with you? But I'm like, I guess that's just kind of like because that would be too overpowered if you're prepared for everything. I mean, we also, once again, like Charles even said, like, it took him decades or years to learn how to properly use that. That's why he's the only one that can use it, because it is a, like, very specific thing. Because it's like, well, how do you decide what comes out of your infinite pocket universe? Like, how do you go searching, like, oh, I'm looking for this particular book, oh, it's not here. How do you know for sure it's not here, considering the bag goes for it? Once again, getting super technical about some supernatural shit. It's like, supernatural stuff, Michael, shut up and move on. But once again, I always love, like, some things will go out of their way to answer little bits like that. It's also, we're talking comic books too, so it's like, comic books go wild with stuff. It's like, it doesn't always have to be logical. It's like, once again, it's magic and supernatural stuff. Shut up and move on. So, it's interesting, obviously, because Charles he's the brawler of the team, as they bring up later on, the brawn, and obviously Edwin is the brains. He actually uses magic and stuff. I don't think he has he has some magic, it seems like he has, like, locked down, but other stuff he needs spell books, essentially, to be able to do, so. But yeah, there's also the mirror trick I kind of moved away from really quickly, of, like, that's how they can kind of teleport around. It's essential spiritual fast travel, which is interesting, but it takes concentration, because if you don't focus enough on where you're trying to go, you could just land somewhere else. I'm like, that's interesting. But, like, yeah, fast travel points all around is actually kind of a pretty dope mechanic to have in this universe. But either way, they go back to their office and get attacked by Gas Mask Dude, and then they cut the mask off of him, and then they burn it and finally set the guy free. He's someone that died during World War I, and basically a museum was doing, like, something on the Great War, and a lot of spirits that are tied to it are there's a lady who's kind of a caretaker. I think it seemed like she might have been like a nurse during that time, is looking after these spirits that are so lost and stuff. And this one in particular was consumed by rage. And so luckily they were able to free him because his mask was kind of a curse. And upon burning it, it's time for him to move on. And lo and behold, the boys have got to skedaddle because death is nearby. Probably, I mean, they didn't have much of a choice considering the circumstances, but it does kind of suck because it's like, cool, we kind of put our office on death. Like, I don't know, like she probably won't like come back, you know, but it's still a thing of, it's still our office, and it's kind of like, ugh, like it's kind of messed up that, death has been here. But either way, the moment they're like, oh, death is coming, I was like, well, since this is what I think it is, I'm like, is it going to be who I think it is? And lo and behold, it is Kirby Howe Baptiste. I was like, yeah! I was like, of course you have to get her for this, considering she's Death in the Sandman. So I was like, that's neat. And also, once again, I love her as Death too, because it's just like, and once again, I'm not familiar with the comics, the Sandman comics, so I don't know like what, I've seen what Death looks like aesthetically in the comics, but I don't know her personality. So, but just like the sweetness that like Death has in this, I'm assuming that's true to the character in the comics as well, but like this sweetness of how she approaches, she's like, right, you've been dead for 100 years, because he was like, I feel like I met you. She's like, yeah, we've met before. And it's just like once again, just like that episode 6, which is a great episode, especially like what the 2 episodes are, like it's basically 2 episodes in one. But like her approach to like how she is that guiding angel, like once like, hey, like it's okay, you know. And he even had that line where he was like, oh, like, you know, is there such thing as, because she was like, yeah, I tried to come for you before, but you were confused at the time, but it seems like you're better now, you know. And it's like, he's like, it's reincarnation thing. He's like, and he quotes, like, he's trying to remember a poem, and she quotes it, and he's like, yeah, and so is that what's going to happen to me? She's like, now this is the part where you find out. And she holds out her hand, and you're just like, there's something, once again, it's like, and she talked to her brother, you know, Dream about that, of, you know, what that means for them, like trying to be that calming voice for them. And she does it so well. And there's something beautiful about the way she talks to people. But obviously Charles asked Edwin, and like, you know, like if death ever does catch us, like, do you think she'll split us up? And Edwin's like, I would never let that happen. And it's like, that's kind of like, obviously like they don't want to move on. Their unfinished business is helping other people. So they've been doing their thing for a while. They meet Emma, who's now like, hey, my friend Crystal, who's a psychic. I think something's going on with her. We find out it's a demonic possession. Wasn't expecting that to be how they met Crystal. Interesting. But I also love Emma being like, I'm such a little girl. How would I afford you? And it's like, first and foremost, your attire shows that you died in like the 1800s. So spiritually speaking, you're older than us. Plus, you also have a supernatural glowing squid, so we know you got some money. She's like, fine, you little twats, fine, you 2 twats, I'll pay. It's just like, why were you being, yeah, like you being trying to be like, oh, but I'm so cute and innocent. It's like, no, you've been around the block enough to like be able to have like a freaking glowing squid as a pet. You've been around the block as a ghost for a while, so you've definitely got more control in this than you kind of let on. It's kind of neat. I'm sure that will play a part in all of this too, where it is a situation of obviously the older, I mean, because it translates typically supernaturally speaking, like the older a supernatural is, the stronger they are. So it's like, right, if you've been around the block for a while as a ghost, like you've got a better grasp on a supernatural world, so it's easier for you to kind of sway more power, I guess, and be able to kind of do more. So, but either way, there was that, I love that kind of switcheroo where you have that, like, right, they're going to put on some disguises, and, like, you see the clowns on the train. I'm like, that's creepy. So I'm like, why is that your disguise? And then the creepy clowns just get off the train. I'm like, what? Oh, the other 2 people on the train is Edwin and Charles. I'm like, what was that rope-a-dope for? That felt completely unnecessary. I'm also felt like, what was that? Was that just meant to be like I tricked you. You thought that was Edwin and Charles. It's not, you know? But I also love, once again, that Inception level of train sequence too, where like the train is like turning because the demon's trying to like get out. It's also neat to know, like, right, they don't, because I was like, did you possess these people? It's like, no, they have like magical tech that allows them, it's like glasses they put on that acts as disguises. It's interesting too, it seems like they keep using the same disguises because the same thing happens later on. They look exactly like that same person. I mean, I guess it's like, it helps where you just kind of don't have to, well, you know, if you want to get technical about it, you don't have to hire multiple actors to keep playing them when they're trying to pretend to be human and interact with the human world. But it's also maybe it's like, but like in universe, the argument could be like, no, these glasses are specifically tuned for one disguise. We can't shift into what. Maybe they'll fiddle with that going forward, but it just feels like like we have one specific disguise and that's it. So luckily they depossessed. That's a depossessed. Jesus. There's a word for it, exorcise the demon out of Crystal, which we later on find out, oh, it's the demon David. It's like, okay. I wonder, is that his actual name, or is that just the name he introduced himself to Crystal as? But I thought it was weird. I was like, wait, we're just going to let him run away? He didn't get sent back to hell or anything. He's just covered in that blanket and he just skedaddles. I'm like, we're just going to okay. Like, we're not going to, I mean, I guess it's like, we don't know enough about him to kind of deal with him properly, so... Turns out, though, Crystal's memories are gone. Initially, it's like, okay, so that seems like that's just a natural byproduct of demonic possession. Turns out there's more to it because we later on find out David actually stole her memories, and he's talking about how special she is, not just as a psychic, but there's something more to it. Obviously, Charles is really excited to have Crystal around. It's like, right, let's take her back to our place. She can chill and relax and rest until her memories come back, but they never did. So Edwin... it's understandable why Edwin would have beef with it because it's been him and Charles for like 3 decades. They've been best buds. Because I thought like that kind of was interesting to me because I assumed Charles and Edwin had known each other forever. It's what I was kind of under the impression of. So because I knew like I guess in my head I thought both of them, and maybe they're changing the continuity for this version of the characters, or maybe this is true to who they are in the comics as well. I can't remember. It's been obviously a while since I saw that episode of Doom Patrol, and I don't remember if they ever really went to their specifics then, but I thought like Edwin and Charles were about the same age. Like they both, I mean, I think they are like both died around the same age, but I thought they were from the same era because Charles died in like 1916. No, Edwin died in 1916. I thought Charles did as well, but it's like, no, like that's why they've only been buds for 30 years because that's when they met 30 years ago. So like Charles's death is from like, if it's set present day and mean like he died in the 90s, maybe earlier, it might even be like the 80s or something like that. Like I said, it depends on when this story is actually being set place. I mean, Crystal does have a cell phone, so it does seem like pretty modern day. Because obviously there was like the debacle of like 94 or something like that is what Edwin had brought up at one point in time. So that's why I'm almost like, it might not be like present day, or maybe it is. I don't know. You can fudge the years a bit or whatever you want to. You could probably keep it modern day enough without really having to get too specific about stuff. So without having to like specifically narrow it down to like a day. There might be some stuff that like makes it clear what date it is and I just missed it. But either way, Charles definitely seems to have a thing for Crystal, because it's not just like, hey, we're hanging, like, it's nice to hang around someone our own age, but it's also because it does seem like he has feelings for her. I am curious. I was curious. I'm like, well, I was about to say something. I was like, maybe she's not into, I mean, not necessarily just Charles, but I was like, maybe she's not into guys, but it's like, well, her and David got together, so I'm like, no. So I was like, I mean, she could easily be bi, but I was curious because there was a whole Nico thing later on, and I was like, what was that about? It's like, I was wondering if that was an infatuation type of thing, or was that just something else entirely? Because maybe that's implying like that's a Nico thing or something there, you know? But either way, we'll get to it when we get to it. This involves initially them getting their case. Well, we find out a little bit, like there's a postman, some supernatural postman that stops by. Apparently he seems nice, but he's also a little creepy. But he ends up dropping off what is a potentially jobs for them, which is interesting. Like, how many people, well, they've got a big enough reputation that ghosts come to them for work, or for cases and stuff, but who is this postman? Like, I wonder if we're going to find out he's actually, yeah, he might be a little creepy, but maybe he's someone specifically we know from, like, the Sandman or something like that, or maybe he's just, I'm curious to find out who this postman is and why he ends up giving them the jobs they do. Like I said, it seems like they interact well enough with him, but it's kind of like, yeah, he's still kind of creepy. I'm wondering in what way. But either way, they stumble across a case because of Crystal's power about a little girl that's still alive and she's lost. And Crystal wants to investigate this case. Edwin, typically not, because it's like, well, there's variety of reasons. They're ghosts. They typically don't deal with living client type of situation. They usually help the dead. We find out more of why that specifically, but I think it's harder to probably help someone living, as they've been limited in what they can do in the living world. But having a living psychic does help. So I also wasn't expecting this to be the international romp that it was. I thought we were just going to stay in London the entire time. It's like, nah, they like peel over to the US, which I'm wondering, is that where they're going to end up staying the entire show? Because we got introduced to two characters that I'm like, those feel like recurring characters that I'm like, so I'm assuming, because they're like renting this place like weekly, so I'm like, I'm assuming, well, the place they're staying, it's a weekly place. So I'm like, I'm assuming they're going to be there the entire time, maybe? We'll have to wait and see. Maybe other cases will take them to other states, or maybe other I'm curious to see what that happens. I think like they're probably just going to be US bound for a bit. To be fair, they were probably mainly UK bound for like decades. So, kind of being able to go out and see the world a little bit more while they do stuff is probably along the lines of what this is going to be. This also, like, this episode kind of answers a question I had to going into the show. Because I've only seen the teaser trailer. I didn't watch the full official trailer. But I was curious to see if, like, was this going to be an episodical thing? I mean, very much kind of like Sandman was. Sandman was kind of episodical for the most part, but there was an overarching element in some regards, overarching arcs. So I was curious whether or not that was going to be the case. And it does seem like it's episodical, but it does have its overarching stuff too. It seems like we got a few overarching elements. Obviously, we get to witness more of Crystal using her powers, and kind of like she doesn't have to directly touch something or someone to basically be able to read it. So Charles and Edwin are talking to the parents and of the little girl that's missing, and nearby Crystal's like reading their emotions and their memories, and it's like, ugh. Deep diving into people's brains is not what she enjoys doing. It makes a lot of sense why you wouldn't want to do that, because it's like, because I think it makes you like seeing other people's stuff is, you've got your own stuff to deal with, plus you're taking in someone else's stuff, and then on top of that, you're also like probably like feeling everything in those memories too, because like when Crystal was reading the mom's memories and everything, it just like she was tearing up, and it was just like because she could feel every bit of that pain. It's like you're opening it's a two-way street, and when you basically get inside someone's heads like that, they're able to get inside yours, and it's just like you're flooded with everything they're thinking and feeling. So it's a very uncomfortable situation. Obviously, she didn't really touch on that. I guess it's just kind of a known thing about psychics, but you would think like Charles and Edwin, well, at least Edwin would be a little more sensitive to that. I think Charles is, because he's very sensitive when it comes to Crystal, unlike Edwin. We learned some more ghost rules about iron, which obviously years and years of Supernatural has taught me, like, yeah, iron works good against ghosts. I'm curious what about salt in this universe is that, because that ends up holding ghosts in place if you draw like a salt circle. Well, I mean, I don't think that was, I can't, God, I'm actually slipping on my Supernatural knowledge. I'm like, yeah, I think that worked specifically on ghosts. I don't think that was just demons in general. I think that worked on just ghosts. I don't think it worked on demons. I can't remember. But either way, the difference is, like, obviously with ghosts, like in Supernatural, when you'd attack them with like something iron, whether it's like, whether it was iron or whatever, like they dissipate for a little bit. But it's interesting how they elaborate on in this world. Like, obviously, iron burns them, but it also like materializes them into the real world for a momentary time. So meaning in that moment, you could kill a ghost. You could like, hit them with iron and then like kill them if need be. It leaves them vulnerable, for as Charles puts it, he's like a few ticks. So who knows, maybe a few seconds, like what that specific time frame is, but it's enough that, it could get you God. So it's like, right, don't want to hang around iron, want to be very careful about that. So it helps to be a ghost who knows a ghost's weakness, but you also want to be careful that that weakness doesn't get used against you. So turns out that the person that kidnapped the little girl, turns out it's a witch named Esther, which the guys are reluctant to go up against a ghost go up against a witch because, well, witches can see them, and it's like, well, if she can see us, she can hurt us. It's like, right, they're kind of like very dangerous. And we also learned that animals talk. It's just they choose not to talk to humans. Because I was also trying to think, because I was like, well, we got some of that with the Sandman, because it's like, well, we have Dream's birds. Although I'm blanking on his name now, the one that's voiced by Patton Oswalt in the show. But also we had that whole like extra episode which dealt with the cats talking. You know, that was amongst themselves, but it kind of plays into that. The fact is, they end up running into a crow called Monty. I'd almost go like, I mean, obviously I associate crows with Dream, so I'm also like, interesting. I'm like, I doubt that's one of Dream's birds or anything like that. It seems like that's specifically Esther's bird, but it just, you know, when you see a crow, it makes you wonder, does it have any correlation or connection to Dream at all? You know, that's just, which is probably messed up on my part. It's like, oh, just because I'm a crow, that must mean I have some ties to one of the endless Dream, you know? So either way. But the episode also like gave us an opportunity to learn more about Charles and Edwin, as well as Crystal, as we find out that the reason why Edwin has such a chip on his shoulder when it comes to Crystal is, once again, it's like, right, this has been me and Charles thing for a while, we're bringing someone else into the fold, but it's also the fact is that we find out how Edwin died. He was basically sacrificed and he went to hell for 70 years. And as Charles puts it, it's like, yeah, it was a clerical error. It's like, that's rough. Basically, he was bullied at the boarding school he was at or whatever, and they sacrificed him as a joke to scare him, but then demons showed up. It killed the others. I don't know if they got, well, it seems like specifically Edwin got sent to hell because as a sacrifice, but the others just straight up died. I was almost hoping they'd still be alive, because I'm like, did Edwin ever get his revenge? I mean, it's like, well, they're probably already in afterlife somewhere. It'd be interesting to see if he'll ever run into them. Who knows? Makes you also wonder, why did it take so long for them to get it? Why was he like finally released from hell after 70 years? Like what that did to him, you know, and it messed with him a lot. And it's interesting too, because we find kind of like why Charles is kind of like, yeah, I smile all the time. It's his way of like, by being friendly and smiling all the time, it's his way to kind of overcompensate from his feelings and stuff. It's like, right, it helps him feel better by making other people feel better. So it's like, right, I'm gonna be the life of the party, I'm gonna be fun, because I gotta you know, help keep Edwin stable, because it's like 70 years of being stuck in hell is gonna fuck with you. Even though that demon was like kind of being like, oh, I'm sorry, like, yeah, this is kind of messed up, but hey, hell's not gonna be that bad enough that 70 years of it like is kind of left, you know, some scars on Edwin. Obviously they're not scars you're going to be able to see necessarily, you know, they're all like mental scars, but still. And then we find out, as I talked about before, the Crystal situation. Turns out she obviously didn't know David was a demon, but then she found out he was a demon and didn't care. It was like, that's interesting. Like 99% of demon possessions is because, oh, you didn't want it, but it's like, no, you let him in. She's like, yes, of course, I thought it was love, but then I wanted him out, but he stayed. And now he wants to go back in, which is an interesting thing too, where it's like demon possession, repossession can only happen if you let them back in, which makes you wonder what's the recidivism rate for like demons repossessing the same person. That's interesting. Because obviously in Supernatural, it's like you literally have to put a special like seal tattoo like Dean and Sam do and other hunters do, that makes it so that you can't get repossessed. Like you have to do something to make sure you, like, it's not like once they've been in you, you can't be repossessed type of thing. Like, I mean, I'm not necessarily on the Supernatural front, but it's like there are, I mean, genre-wise, not just specifically the show, but I'm like, there's certain things where it's like once it's happened to you, you can't be reinfected again. It's actually interesting, kind of makes me think of like Van Helsing, like once Vanessa, well then some other characters later on, finally like uninfect you, you can never get reinfected type of situation again. So just kind of something really interesting to kind of think about. That also like led to this really interesting conversation between Crystal and like when all this stuff was kind of being like talked about previously, like Crystal had this interesting conversation with like the butcher lady who's renting her place to Crystal. There was that whole conversation about selfishness, like, right, she's like, everyone's selfish, focused on their own stuff. All we can do is be lucky that maybe 1 minute out of anyone's life they're taking time to think about someone else. But it's like she's kind of making it seem like everyone's selfish, which is kind of a dark, very pessimistic view on things. You know, it's like, once again, everyone's got their life, their circumstance, and their story. So it feels like that's probably pulled from something very specific. But even she's like, wait, am I being selfish? Because she's like, right, I'm dealing with some stuff with my ex being back in my life and he's stalking me, but my pseudo friends aren't like, they're focusing on their thing and not my thing. Because especially Edwin being like, hey, like, he's your demon. She's like, he's not my demon. The fact of the matter is, you helped me and everything, but making him our fucking demon. But it's also like, right, she did kind of keep from them the fact is that it was kind of a, hey, I was okay with him possessing me thing. It was a willing possession and not the forced possession. But once again, he didn't leave when she wanted him to. And she doesn't have any memories of like what he was up to in that time frame, because she was possessed for like 3 months. So then there was also them sneaking into Esther's house after they got plans for her house. They were going to sneak in there, locate the little girl, take her out, and then, you know, and obviously keep the witch distracted by being like, oh, there was an issue at the post office. She left. And Edwin and Charles go in. Edwin gets sucked into what is essentially like a massive void and ends up finding a little girl. It's like, well, how do we get her out of here? Let's stuff her in a bag of tricks. It's like, Jesus, that's kind of wild. Thinking about like, yeah, let's just put this little girl in this infinite bag, void inside of this bag. Yeah, that's how they got out. I'm also think it's interesting they didn't have to deal with that snake. I'm like, there's no way we're just never going to deal with that snake. Obviously, it was in Crystal's vision, but also we saw it slithering just as Edwin was being pulled up. I'm like, we're just not going to deal with it. It's just going to be like, yeah, that's something Esther has. We're just never going to encounter. I'm like, we're definitely not done with Esther, the way everything plays out. Her casually strolling up, being like, oh yeah, it didn't work out, huh? Yeah, like, I know your dead boys, like, went in there and stuff like that. Like, you know, what if you needed something from me, all you had to do was ask. She's like, well, the little girl, oh yeah, I'm not giving her up. That vitality, even that disgusting way she went about saying like, oh, like, your skin can stretch so much. I was like, Jesus. It's like, well, that's how she stays young, which she's also like, the beauty of youth and stuff, and even pissed at the boys because, like, right, because they're dead, they get to stay young forever. And she's like, I'm so jealous. But she also has an iron cane, came prepared. Crystal, like, ended up grabbing her legs, and that was like, I don't know what that was. That felt like some biblical shit, whatever Esther's circumstances are. And then like something, it looked like a giant head was popping out of it. I'm like, this show is trippy as shit. I didn't even talk about the aesthetic thing of like wherever David took Crystal, there were giant eyeballs. I'm like, dude, I like how weird this show is. It needs to be weird. This universe is fucking weird. With just so much like going on, gods, demons, every like supernatural creature under the sun, like, you need to get weird. And I'm glad this show gets to like, once again, kind of have that Beetlejuice flair of like, oh, it's weird and cheeky and fun, you know, but it can be dark. I think that's kind of a neat like little mixture concoction for what this show is. But then Charles ended up possessing her, which I think it was interesting. I was like, oh, what are the consequences? And I forgot, like, right, the reason why they don't is, Edwin had brought that up earlier, they don't ever possess humans because it puts a bullseye on them. Like, yeah, the people who are looking for us can, like, zone in on us the moment we do some like, possessing humans. I wonder would they be able to possess animals or not? We haven't really gone into that. It hasn't come up this episode, so, but, yeah. But they didn't beat Esther. She was just like, all right, fine. You guys, you have no idea what you've done. And now obviously she's telling Monty to shut up her bird. So it's like, cool. I'm trying to threaten some kids here. And it's just like, don't worry. I'm going to get mine back. So I'm like, cool. So Esther's going to be a overarching issue too. Plus you're constantly running from death. And now you're going to be running from what is essentially the afterlife. Well, not even essentially, is the afterlife lost and found. I saw her name in the opening credits, but it seems like the head of that is played by Ruth Connell. I was like, hey, Ruth! I saw her name because I had no idea she was going to be in this show. Which is funny. I don't think it's the same episode, but I know she was in a Doom Patrol episode. She was like a demon or something in hell. So I'm like, interesting. But yeah, because I kept referencing Supernatural with the show as well. And obviously, Ruth Connell was a recurring character for a while in the show, so I was just like, oh, that's so dope. I adore Ruth Connell, so I'm like, just being able to see her in more stuff, I'm just always excited. So I was like, hell yeah. So we're probably going to be seeing her periodically as we cut back to them chasing after Charles and Edwin. It's like, yeah, they've been on a run for a very long time, and it's like, you never forget the ones that got away type of situation. So because she's looking at their photos at the end of the episode and be like, oh, you naughty boy. So that's why I'm like, there's so much allocated to this specific location they're in. It's like they're going to be here potentially for a while, especially because of the whole, like, they, like I said, they seem like very specific characters. The butcher lady that's like loaning out a place or renting out a place to Crystal, but also Nico, which, like I said, that was interesting. It's interesting too, like the anime-esque poster she has on her door. Apparently, like, her room is filled with like anime and pictures of guys, but it's like the anime poster is of 2 guys and a girl. I'm like, oh, that seemed very symbolic in that regard, just because of, you know, Crystal's circumstance with the Dead Boy detectives. But either way, this case has been solved. It was kind of nice what Crystal was able to kind of do. Once again, displaying even more of what her power is able to do to a mind. She was able to make the little girl, it's like, right, you don't have to worry about, you don't even have to think about where you were or the scary things you saw. Just go home and kind of be happy, you know? It's kind of, you know, it's kind of a twofold in multiple ways, because this case was important to both Crystal and the boys, because as Edwin puts it earlier in the episode when him and like Crystal really went at it, is you don't, these cases matter, because me and Charles, our deaths didn't matter. When I died, it was like, oh, it was an act of God. When Charles died, his circumstances were covered up by the boarding school. So like our deaths went unsolved because they weren't important. And so that's why they do what they do. We solve the cases that no one else can, because these cases are important. They matter. These people matter. Because it's like, especially because it's like, we're helping people that didn't matter because we didn't matter. And I was like, that's really heartbreaking. And even Crystal wants to help out this little girl go home, because she can barely grasp onto a home, because she's like, with the little girl's mom breaking down, I'm like, is my mom doing the same thing somewhere out there missing me? So by helping this little girl, maybe it's almost like helping yourself a little bit, you know? So every party involved in this situation is kind of using their own pain and trauma to help someone else going through a similar circumstance, you know? And, you know, so I thought that was just kind of a beautiful, like, element to kind of tie the cases together, but also, like, intertwine it with their personal things of understanding their motivations for why they do what they do. And, you know, especially, like, Edwin and Charles understanding that, I thought was kind of just pretty neat. So, either way, I'm very, very excited to ultimately see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.